many people care about, but it's not something that bubbles to the top of the political agenda as often as they might want. But today, in that speech from Boris Johnson and in a list of policy suggestions from Labour, animal welfare is a talking point. Through his Brexit prism, Boris Johnson mentioned the export and import of live animals.
Insofar as we increasingly turn to the rest of the world, as we are, then we will be able to do our own thing. We'll be able, if we choose, to fish our own fish, to ban the traffic in live animals, to end payments to some of the richest landowners in Britain, whilst supporting the rural economy. We'll be able to cut VAT on domestic fuel and other products.
And Labour announced a series of ideas and a draft policy document, including a ban on exporting animals for slaughter, an end to badger culls, and expanding affordable vet care for pet owners on low incomes. Other measures proposed by Labour include mandatory labelling of domestic and imported meat, a ban on imports of foie gras, and on ivory trading. We're going to talk in more detail about the export of animals. The draft policy document says this: ban live exports for slaughter or fattening. This would include an exemption for breeding animals, providing provision is in place ensuring they are transported under genuinely high welfare standards. This would also include an exemption for livestock transported across the Northern Ireland border. Frank Langrish is a sheep and cattle farmer in Sussex. Sean Gifford is head of campaigns at Compassion in World Farming. You're both very welcome. Frank Langrish, tell me about what you do.
Good evening. Well, I'm basically a livestock farmer, but I have been over the years involved in transporting animals into Europe. Now, what always confuses me about this is the term export, when it actually should just be transport, because those animals that are going into Europe is part of the intra-community trade. And it really comes down to the length of time that animals travel and the way they're treated when they arrive at the other end.
Regardless of where the destination is, you mean?
Well, yes, because within Europe there is one set of rules, and the rules are extremely strict on animals that cross borders. The animals all have to be veterinarily inspected first. The trucks are state-of-the-art trucks with satellite tracking. There's an enormous number of safety measures put in place to make sure that everything is done correctly. However, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that over the years, the animal rights lobby protested so much that the main ferry companies out of Dover, stopped taking animals for slaughter or for further fattening.
And what effect would a ban on live export or live travel have on you?
Well, in the short term, not very much, because recently there haven't been that many going. However, what the big difference is going to be is that if we end up with Boris Johnson's dream of a hard Brexit, then we will end up with tariffs. And now, there are very punitive tariffs on sheep meat going out of the country. Rather unusually, there are no tariffs on live animals.
So what does that mean?
Well, that would mean that when you've got a 40-some-odd% tariff on a lamb carcass, but no tariff on that animal if it went out alive, the likelihood is that farmers would look to either get their own ferry to be able to move those animals tariff-free, because the value increase would be colossal.
Right, Sean Gifford from Compassion in World Farming. I presume you welcome the fact this is being talked about today. What about the detail of the proposals?
Yes, of course, we welcome these proposals wholeheartedly. Both the Conservatives and the Labour Party have rightly highlighted this is a main issue that people care about. You know, animals animals are capable of suffering, of feeling pain and joy and happiness, just like us. They value their lives just like us, but they are treated abysmally when transported, around the UK and also onto the continent. You know, these animals, they're crammed into trucks and ships, often for hundreds of miles. They suffer from dehydration, from injury, from illness. It's simply put, it's cruelty to animals. And
what about the high standards and monitoring that Frank was talking about?
Yeah, well, the EU Commission themselves have done investigations into what's actually happening on the ground. So, these laws are very well and good on the books, but when it comes to the actual application, they're wholly wanting. The Commission has found animals subjected to rough handling, beating, excessive use of electric prods. This this kind of cruelty to animals really has no place in modern society. And Compassion in World Farming, the organization that I work for, has conducted countless undercover investigations into this trade, and we find the same cruelty and the same suffering time and time again. And I think that's why both political parties are now looking to end this trade.
Frank Langrish?
Well, the question comes down to transport, and I would dispute Compassion in World Farming's idea that animals are treated so badly. Every animal in this country at some point in its life will be transported, and I can assure him that the standards of travel that we operate to are second to none in this country, because you're dealing with very valuable commodities. And while I know an animal is a sentient being, it's also an income and a living to the farmer. So it has to arrive at its destination in the best possible condition for it to be paid for it. And the other thing which is I'm slightly concerned about, which is going to be this massive anomaly, is the Irish Sea. Now, the Irish Sea crossing, if you go from Stranraer to Belfast, is about the same distance as crossing the Channel. Yet that's perfectly all right. Yet we can't cross the bit of water from Dover to Calais. Now, that puzzles me.
Sean Gifford?
Yeah, well, I'll take Frank's point that animals are sentient beings, that they value their lives and they don't want to be put in these horrible situations. I mean, there is really no humane way to transport an animal. Sheep, cows, other animals, they're used to living their lives on farms in rural settings. So suddenly when they have to endure a journey of 8 hours, 10 hours, 90 hours on the back of a truck or in the belly of a ship, they're in a completely unfamiliar environment. You can see the terror in their eyes, and this is completely unnecessary to put animals through this ordeal. We can have a local trade in meat and completely bypass the need to transport animals to the continent.
All right. Thank you both. Sean Gifford from Compassion in World Farming and Frank Langrish, sheep and cattle farmer in Sussex. 5:45 now. Susan has the headlines.